Last year, St. Kitts and Nevis embraced a bold new vision, one built on resilience, innovation, fairness, and prosperity for all. A vision grounded in 7 pillars that touch every part of our lives: energy, water, food security, the creative and digital economy, infrastructure and housing, the environment, and people, our greatest asset. These pillars are the blueprint of a modern, sustainable island state, a roadmap to a nation that works better, lives cleaner, grows smarter, and creates more opportunities for every citizen and every resident. And in 2025, we saw that vision move from promise to progress, step by step. Investment by investment, project by project, the government led by Prime Minister Honorable Dr. Terry forward. Digitizing and reforming. Country, information became visible, homes going up, land titles in hand, water finally flowing reliably, new roads opening, farmers and fishers earning more, digital services unlocking convenience, trainees stepping into the jobs of the future, hospitals and care modernizing, young people receiving savings and investments, and families finding real relief when they needed it most. More importantly, this year proved something fundamental. People are not just included in the agenda, people are the purpose of it. Let's take a look at some of the work done this year, pillar by pillar. Pillar 1, energy transition. Moving boldly toward a future that is cleaner and cheaper, St. Kitts and Nevis continues to prove that energy is a key. Because when you solve energy, you solve water, food security, and ultimately salaries and national. In 2025, this became reality in real, measurable ways as the country advanced its most ambitious energy transformation in history. This year, our geothermal dream finally became a national plan. Financing now secured, contracts reset to begin in early 2026. The Nevis geothermal reliable baseload power, enough to run an entire country, this country. This shift means stability, a future where electricity is no longer tied to oil prices, where households and businesses benefit from lower costs and predictable bills, where industries can grow more competitively, and where new jobs emerge in a sector poised to define a global development for decades to come. As geothermal moved toward execution, 2025 also became the reset year for the solar PV and battery energy storage project. Government relaunched electricity once operational in late 2026. The project promised fuel expense, greater bill stability, and a cleaner environment. But most importantly, it promises opportunity. Solar training programs are now in full swing, ensuring that Kittitians and Nevisians will be the ones installing, maintaining, and operating these major systems, keeping the economic benefits right here at home. To support this clean energy future, 2025 also delivered the most significant grid upgrade in our nation's history. A modern grid, and Skelex's new energy transition unit has begun upgrading 11 legacy lines to infrastructure. The team is strengthening the grid against in smart systems and response times to outages. Though much of this work happens silently in the background, it is the foundation that will allow renewable energy, desalination plants, new housing developments, and future industries to operate smoothly and reliably. It is infrastructure that literally powers progress. This progress is reaching directly into people's homes. In March of this year, 2025, the rollout of smart electric meters began, ushering in a new era of transparency and control for consumers. For the first time, Households will be able to track electricity usage in 15-minute intervals, helping detect waste, reduce, and plan consumption more effectively. Prepaid options will give customers greater flexibility, while upcoming interconnection policies will allow homeowners with solar panels to sell excess energy back to the grid. It's greater choice, it's real savings, empowerment in the palm of your hand. But technology alone cannot transform a nation. People do. 2025 was a year of building human capacity at scale. In January, the Federation hosted its first ever electric vehicle training and certification course, giving local mechanics internationally recognized credentials. Solar PV empowerment training soon followed, along with advanced renewable energy training in Taiwan, turning young people, technicians, and tradesmen into certified green energy professionals. These programs are not just preparing workers for new jobs, they are creating new income streams and new pathways to generational wealth. As EVs, solar systems, smart grids, and battery storage become the national standard, our people won't just use the technology, they will build it, maintain it, innovate it, and profit from it. Pillar 2, water security. This government fully understands that water is the foundation of life, public health, agriculture, tourism, investment, and national confidence. And we continue to make bold steps in securing a future when our taps run 24/7, moving from temporary fixes to permanent solutions. And nowhere is that clearer than in our desalination program. At the C.A. Paul Southwell Industrial Park, the Federation's largest desalination plant powered up for the first time in October 2025. Now, in final testing, this 2 million gallon a day facility is on track to restore 24-hour water access to Basseterre and surrounding communities. For households, this means the end of chronic rationing. For businesses and investors, it means predictability, one of the most valuable assets in any economy. On the East Coast, the Federation's first solar-powered desalination plant continues to operate at the Canada Industrial Site, producing roughly 70,000 gallons of clean water each day. Powered entirely by renewable energy, it reduces costs, strengthens climate resilience, and supports communities like Connery's, Keys, and nearby industrial corridor. Together, these desalination plants mark a historic turning point. St. Kitts and Nevis is no longer waiting on rainfall to guarantee water. We are producing it ourselves. But desalination is only one piece of the puzzle. This year, the government completed the most sophisticated water survey ever done in St. Kitts, a semi-airborne hydrogeological scan that mapped the island from Keyon to Old Road. Delivered in October, the survey identified 17 promising groundwater sites, with 10 prioritized for immediate development. For decades, communities like Sadlers, St. Paul's, Newton Ground, Sandy Point, and Challengers have struggled during dry spells. Now, they stand to benefit from new climate-resilient wells that will boost supply where it is needed most. To move swiftly, the government pre-advanced procurement for drilling. A contract was signed in September with Water and Oil Well Services from Trinidad and Tobago. These wells mean reliability for families, expansion for farmers, better services for hoteliers, and employment for our local construction and engineering sectors. All of this fits into a wider investment framework that is transforming the entire water system: storage, interconnection, leak reduction, pressure management, and modern monitoring. It's not just more water, it's smart water. Guide decision making and relates to pipelines, pumping systems, reducing losses and lowering operating costs. Anchoring all of this is the SKN Transwater Project, the Federation's flagship climate finance water initiative. In 2025, The project advanced through major public consultations, technical designs, and international frameworks with the Green Climate Fund. Transwater is a vehicle that will overhaul outdated infrastructure, reduce non-revenue water, introduce low-carbon technologies, and build the climate-ready water system our islands need. It brings global financing into local hands, creating jobs, strengthening resilience, and ensuring that every gallon counts. Pillar 3. Food security. Food security is national security. It is jobs, income, exports, and the comfort of knowing that in a changing world, we can feed ourselves. This year, we continued bold strides to transform agriculture and fisheries into engines of resilience and wealth creation, built on innovation, climate-smart practices, and new opportunities for farmers, fishers, and young people. The year began with the Federation emerging from one of the most challenging droughts in recent memory. Instead of setbacks, we used the moment to accelerate investment. Through a multi-million-dollar intervention, farmers received free drip irrigation systems, drought-resilient seeds, protective crop coverings, and on-farm support to safeguard production. These upgrades meant higher yields with less water, lower operating costs, and more predictable income, especially for small farmers whose livelihoods depend on every harvest. 2025 also saw unprecedented support for the livestock sector. A dedicated $1 million account was created to secure a stable and uninterrupted supply of animal feed, ensuring farmers never face shortages due to global supply delays. Veterinary medicine and livestock programs expanded, giving students hands-on training in pregnancy diagnosis, ultrasound use, and animal husbandry. The result is a stronger, more professional livestock industry, one that protects food supply while opening new career pathways for young people. Our investment in technology pushed agriculture into a modern era. A national drought forecasting system powered by satellite data, digital mapping, and real-time WhatsApp alerts now guides farmers on when to plant, irrigate, and conserve water. This climate-smart tool transforms decision-making, giving farmers the same kind of digital intelligence used in advanced economies and helping protect their income in an unpredictable climate. At sea, 2025 was a breakthrough year. The government deployed 12 of 15 new fish aggregating devices. These subsurface FADs are sturdier, safer, and designed to boost catch rates, reduce fuel costs, and increase earnings for fishers. And it is working. Fisheries revenue has risen from EC 8 million a few years ago to EC 90 million. But our oceans are not our only sources of food. They are ecosystems that must be protected. In June of this year, the Federation launched a groundbreaking king crab coral restoration initiative. Fishers and marine stewards received training to raise native Caribbean king crabs, which help revive coral reefs by naturally removing excess algae. This creates a double benefit: healthier reefs for tourism and biodiversity, and a new blue economy product that fishers can sell to restaurants and hotels, generating an entirely new income stream. On land, diversification took center stage. Nature's Sustainable Farm moved into its next phase with over 100 acres now under cultivation and the first ever export of St. Kitts grown Tabasco peppers to the United States firmly on the horizon. Each acre employs up to 5 people, meaning hundreds of jobs and a new export market that links farmers directly to global value chains. All of this falls under a broader shift toward eco-friendly, climate-smart agriculture, greenhouse expansion, modern hatcheries, precision irrigation, soil-saving practices, and the Climate-Smart Agriculture Project, now advancing through national consultation, signals a future where agriculture is not just sustainable, but profitable, competitive, and resilient. Pillar 4. Sustainable industries. We continue to invest in our own by building out our talent, empowering entrepreneurs, and opening new pathways to wealth creation. This year, The creative economy stepped confidently into the future. As part of Global Entrepreneurship Week 2025, the government hosted the first ever AI in Business Summit and award ceremony. It brought together creatives, entrepreneurs, and technologists to explore how artificial intelligence can amplify marketing, design, storytelling, and content production. For the first time, our artists and cultural entrepreneurs were positioned not just as performers, but as innovators and business leaders ready to export their craft to the world. But the digital revolution goes far beyond the arts. This year, we also launched one of the region's most ambitious cybersecurity training programs. Beginning in February and graduating its first cohort in November, the program trained participants to international standards and prepared them for remote cybersecurity work, jobs that pay global salaries from right here at home. As the second cohort is set to begin in January 2026, more citizens will enter a career field that has unlimited earning potential and global demand. This, coupled with the electric vehicle training and certification program and the solar empowerment training, ensuring that as renewable energy expands, our people, not foreign contractors, are able to benefit. For small businesses, 2025 was a year of unprecedented support. Hundreds of entrepreneurs gained access to training through the Building Bankable Business program, launched in April to teach financial literacy, budgeting, cash flow management, and business planning. Its purpose is simple: to transform ideas into bankable enterprises and entrepreneurs into investment-ready leaders. But training alone is not enough. In October, the Citizenship by Investment Unit launched the Local Micro and Small Businesses Grant Program, offering easy $10,000 grants to qualifying businesses across the Federation. By November, 36 businesses has already been approved, receiving capital to expand operations, purchase equipment, hire staff, or move their services online. These grants injected real money directly into the hands of local entrepreneurs, supporting the creation of jobs, products, and new services across every sector. This momentum is matched by one of the most transformative digital agendas in the Caribbean. In May 2025, St. Kitts and Nevis launched its Electronic Travel Authorization (ETA) system and e-border platform, enabling faster, more secure processing for visitors and dramatically improving the travel experience, especially during major events like the St. Kitts Music Festival. This strengthens tourism, enhances national security, and positions the Federation as a modern, tech-forward destination. Behind the scenes, the digital transformation is accelerating even further. The government is advancing its national digital ID system, the core of all future e-services, set to enable secure online access to government services, banking, trade, and digital signatures. Parallel to this, the electronic civil registry system also moved forward, digitizing births, deaths, marriages, and adoptions so citizens and the diaspora can access official documents from anywhere in the world. Together with online tax services, the developing online passport system, business registration portal, and single trade window, St. Kitts and Nevis is building a digital economy that lowers barriers, speeds up transactions, attracts investments, and creates new income possibilities for every citizen. Pillar 5. Sustainable settlements. A strong nation is built, literally, on the spaces where people live, learn, heal, travel, play, and grow. This year, the government accelerated ownership through the NHC Renaissance Project, delivering and constructing nearly 200 new homes across Stapleton, Harry Phipps, Otleys, Sandy Point, and other communities. More land was secured to scale the project further, ensuring that hundreds of families will soon step into houses that instantly increase their net worth. Every home built supports contractors, tradesmen, truckers, suppliers, and strengthens the foundation for generational wealth. Side by side with the new housing came one of the most meaningful reforms in decades: land regularization. In 2025 alone, 531 lots were distributed, with full titles handed over to families in St. Peter's, Lagreed, St. Paul's, and other long-neglected communities. In several cases, beneficiaries walked into the banks the very next day because for the first time, they had collateral, dignity, and the power to invest in their future. This is land, not just as a place to live, but as empowerment. And for the first time in our history, the entire land system is going digital. A new land administration and information system is being built, replacing decades of paper files with a transparent, efficient online platform. Beginning early in 2026, citizens will be able to submit applications, track their status, and view available lots on a digital map. This modernization protects national patrimony, strengthens fairness, and speeds up development, making it easier for families, investors, and planners to build a modern St. Kitts and Nevis. 2025 also marked a leap forward in climate-resilient public infrastructure with the unveiling of the designs for the new JNF General Hospital. This state-of-the-art, storm-resistant facility is being developed in partnership with Taiwan and OECC. Construction begins shortly, bringing jobs in the short term and delivering long-term benefits in healthcare. This hospital will save lives, but it will also generate economic activity every single day. Across the island, the government advanced one of the largest road modernization programs in our history. Over $80 million has been invested in less than 3 years. This year alone, the St. Peter's Main Road and F.T. Williams Highway East was fully upgraded and completed. Over 3 miles of safer, smoother roadway with sidewalks, retaining walls, and new access points. These works shorten travel time, raise property values, improve safety, and open new economic corridors for families and businesses. Major community roads from Rawlins and Newton Ground to Shadwell and Palmetto Point, and many more also saw significant roadwork upgrades. Pillar 6, circular economy. A sustainable nation is a clean nation, and this year we took some of the boldest steps in our history to reshape how our country manages waste. We passed the Plastic Waste Reduction Act 2025, a landmark law that positions St. Kitts and Nevis as a regional leader in the fight against plastic pollution. Rolled out in 3 phases, the ban eliminated the import, sale, and distribution of single-use plastic bags, styrofoam containers, straws, cups, plates, and utensils. By November 2025, the major categories of single-use plastics were officially out of the Federation. This means cleaner coastlines, healthier marine ecosystems, reduced landfill pressure, and a better tourism product. But more importantly, it means shifting national behavior, encouraging reusable bags, refilling bottles, and greener businesses that save money while protecting the environment. Alongside legislation, we strengthen the systems that make sustainability real. The St. Kitts and Nevis Recycling Project, supported by the Taiwan Technical Mission, accelerated significantly in 2025. Paper recycling was introduced on both islands. New pilot recycling programs launched in Nevis communities, and 57 schools participated in a national recycling competition, transforming environmental education.
Morning again, everyone. Honorable members, today we substantively debate and continue the second reading of the bill. I wish to remind us all that while our views may differ, our shared responsibility to the people of St. Christopher and Nevis unites us. I therefore ask that we conduct these proceedings with the mutual respect, courtesy, and regard for the standing orders, allowing for robust yet respectful debate in the best interest of our Federation. On the adjournment yesterday, I indicated that the first member of the opposition bench responding shall be given equal time as the Minister of Finance. I'd like to place on the record again that the allotted time, therefore, is 4 hours, 45 minutes and 51 seconds, while the other honorable members are afforded the allotment of 90 minutes and an opportunity to request an extension of time not exceeding 30 minutes. So, therefore, I now recognize the honorable member for Nevis 9. You may proceed.
Good morning, Madam Speaker, and good morning to my colleagues on this side, and of course my colleagues who are on the government side. I wish to start, Madam Speaker, by assuring this Honourable House that I shall not be 4 hours and 45 minutes, but shall try my best to constrain my usual exuberance and try to complete my response to this budget in a timely fashion. Madam Speaker, we find ourselves here today, as the debate would have started yesterday, but the substantive responses dealing with the Appropriation 2026 Bill 2025. And of course, each year the public looks forward to this engagement because it sets out the plans and programs for the government for the approaching fiscal year. I would wish to commend the mover of the budget for his presentation yesterday, and also, of course, to commend the hard-working persons at the Ministry of Finance and the other ministries who have contributed to the preparation of this annual document. It is an important exercise, and I'm optimistic that the public would really listen to this debate, understand the issues, and not be overly preoccupied with what they're getting, because sometimes it seems that people are listening to the budget only to determine whether there is some benefit to them. And of course, whilst we all like the idea of some benefit, it is important that we listen carefully and pay attention to the plans and programs that are being proposed. I quite like the language that the government has employed. In fact, I have employed it myself from time to time, of the Sustainable Island State. And as part of that Sustainable Island State agenda, clearly having a proper financial footing is important. And so having said that, I want to look at just some very narrow areas and then take my seat and allow others to comment on the budget proposals as they are. I start my debate, Madam Speaker, where I think I have in the past started, or at least spent some time, and that is on the issue of diversification of the local economy. I have said it when I was in government and found myself on those benches, and since I've been back in opposition, that this country is overly reliant on citizenship by investment. The Honourable Mover said so yesterday, and it has been a consistent theme in terms of the financial life of our country. That since about 2010 or thereabouts, so for the past decade and a half, citizenship by investment has really been the backbone of the economy in terms of revenue flows into the country. I am very afraid that if that golden goose were to either stop laying eggs or were to die, then this country is going to be in very grave difficulty. And I believe, Madam Speaker, that the warning signs have been there now for many years, and that we have had ample opportunity over those years to seek to put certain mechanisms in place to try to diversify the national economy. The Prime Minister said so in his presentation yesterday, that there are times when we look at the revenue generation for our country, that citizenship by investment accounts for over 50%. And so if we can imagine a situation where that 50% is extracted, taken out of the budget, you realize immediately what kind of difficulties this country would be in. Overnight. We complain a lot, well, not complain, we agitate and are anxious oftentimes about natural disasters, hurricanes and the like, earthquakes. We know that they can come at any time. But this, I think, has been a Damocles sword hanging over this country for a very long time. And, of course, when times are good, we don't really pay much attention. It is akin to someone who's in good health. They don't bother about a doctor. They're not too concerned about the medical system. But if they were to get sick, then it becomes a concern. And I have been sounding this alarm when I was in government, when I'm in opposition, it really doesn't matter. Because I think that the facts are clear and the information has been clear that we are overly reliant on citizenship by investment. And I make that point to say that in my humble opinion, Madam Speaker, the efforts at diversification have not come fast enough. We have not, in my opinion, been operating at pace in relation to efforts to diversify the St. Kitts Nevis economy. Now, I do not wish to be misunderstood. I have no difficulty with citizenship by investment continuing to play a significant part. In fact, I'm very proud of the fact that this idea was given to the world by St. Kitts and Nevis. Way back in 1984, when no one else had thought of it, we thought of it. And in fact, even the great United States is now implementing something similar. Different price point perhaps, but something similar nevertheless. It tells us that the idea is a good idea. But over the years, as monies have flowed in fact, I'll get to some statistics shortly, but you'll see that even in the grips of COVID, CBI kept churning. Monies kept coming in. And I have observed over the years that our tax revenue has been fairly flat. Nominal increase, nominal decrease, but fairly flat. And I will get to the numbers, but I make that point, Madam Speaker, to make this point, that in my humble opinion, your tax revenue is the best indicator of how your local economy is doing. Announcing each year surplus after surplus, and I was in a government that was in love with that word, doesn't quite make sense when that surplus is entirely being generated from external sources, from external financial flows. And the local economy, in my humble opinion, has been left, how should I say, almost in a state of, I don't want to say neglect, but perhaps benign neglect. Because you're getting so much money from over here. I described it publicly as a stream of revenue flowing down College Street Gut. So much money flowing that you don't really care so much about the VAT and the other things, because we're not talking about tens of millions, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that are flowing in. And so our local economy, I don't want to be pejorative, but I would even refer to it as our real economy, has been fairly flat. Growing perhaps, but not growing at an exponential rate, not growing at a rate that can really propel us forward. So we have really found ourselves in this basket, which is CBI. And time again in this house, and in our public discourses in the byways and highways of our country, we have heard this word diversification. But I ask the question, and I do so rhetorically, what really have we done that is tangible, that one can look to and say that there have been steps taken to really diversify the St. Kitts Nevis economy? And I'm not proposing to belabor it. I did promise our interpreter, I hope that's the right language, that I would be mercifully brief, because she admonished me not to take 5 hours. And so I don't propose to belabor any of these points. But I want to highlight a few aspects of this diversification journey that we have talked about, but in my opinion, have not realized. I start with the cannabis industry. Now, for somebody who does not use cannabis, I'm sure this house is tired of hearing me talk about cannabis. The reason I mention cannabis is because we have now for nearly a decade been talking about a cannabis industry. It has been at least that, because I recall that when I was in government, this was the big talk that we had. We, in my opinion, did not deliver. This new government has also been talking about cannabis. We've heard about cannabis authority. We've heard about cannabis chairman. We've heard about all kinds of things being done in relation to cannabis. But I ask the question of this house and of this nation, what have we really done to progress this as an industry that can provide another string to the economic bow of St. Kitts and Nevis? What have we done? And even now as I speak, Madam Speaker, our people out there on 4th Street and on Main Street are still unclear as to what the rules are in relation to cannabis. And I come here today because I feel quite passionate about this. I have seen some young men in Nevis who have been arrested, charged, their pictures all over social media. For what? Ganja. One cousin of mine, I won't call his name, but he reached out to me and he said to me that he has been growing cannabis in his backyard. He said to me that he has been experimenting with different strains. I don't know that he's a chemist or a biologist or has gone to anybody's school, but he said to me that he is learning from YouTube. Now, this is important because what it shows is the entrepreneurial spirit and the effort by our people to create something out of nothing. This young man is saying to me, Madam Speaker, that he has been experimenting, he has been learning from YouTube, he is trying to create different strains and improved strains of cannabis because this is the industry that he wants to be in. Well, not so long ago, the police broke into his, I shouldn't say break in, that's not the right language. The police came into his premises, executed a warrant, pulled up his ganja trees, locked him up, charged him, photo was out. And I said to myself, well, if we as the government and as the parliament have been talking for over a decade about the cannabis industry, and young Nevisians and Kittitians are out there exhibiting entrepreneurial zeal and interest in doing something in this industry, why are we locking them up? Why are we criminalizing them? Why don't we let the police free to deal with people with guns and people who are robbing people? They tell me the only thing cannabis does is it make you sleepy and it make you hungry. So people who smoke in ganja, I'm told, are not people who necessarily going out there go be violent with anybody. They say it makes you mellow. I'm sure the Prime Minister could speak to that. So, the situation, Madam Speaker, is that young people, who in my opinion ought to be encouraged, young people ought to be incentivized, if we're serious about, listen, weaning ourselves off this dependence on CBI and saying to our population, listen, here's something you can get into. The good Minister of Agriculture is here. And I am fairly certain that with the arable lands that are available in St. Kitts and Nevis, with the right incentives and the right encouragement, we can jumpstart something real. But instead of that, we are criminalizing ganja. Still after all these years, we have not put in place the necessary mechanisms. You know what this young man said to me? And he has been calling me almost on a daily basis. I hope he's listening. And he said to me, he said, It is not that I want to grow ganja without a license, but I do not know how to apply for a license. I don't know who to apply to for a license. I don't know what the fees are, what the process is, because nothing has been put in place in terms of the framework. So I'm saying, how could it be fair to these youngsters who are trying to do something to help themselves, that we fail to put in place the necessary framework for them to get what they need to be compliant with the law? It's like, if I can use an example off the top of my head, Madam Speaker, it's almost akin to me buying a motor car, learning how to drive, having the motor car, needing to use the motor car, but because the police are not doing any tests, I can't get a license. What am I to do with the car? Stand up every morning and watch it? People need to live. People need to live. And when I see these youngsters who are trying their best, as this young man, I go back to him, he said, Mr. Brantley, I've been in trouble in the past. I'm trying my best to stay out of trouble. So I get up in the morning, I deal with my plants. I talk to them. I spend time with them. I experiment with what I'm doing. I go on YouTube, I see how to do things. He said, I don't have no gun. I'm not involved in that. He said, I'm done with that type of activity. And as I mentioned that, and I will get to the issue of crime later, this, for me, is one of the effective ways of us dealing with crime. The Prime Minister in his presentation talked about opportunities. He said some things about the paying for peace and said that they had a different approach in this government. Well, whichever approach, I am grateful that crime is down, and dramatically so. But I raise the point that for these youngsters who are trying to do something to help themselves, which is non-violent, which doesn't infringe on anybody, where they're pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, you know, that is the story of St. Kitts and Nevis, you know, Madam Speaker. I don't know of those in here, perhaps the Honorable Attorney General, but none of the rest of us were born with a silver spoon. Everybody in here except the AG has had to struggle. So, the reality is that we are accustomed to making something out of nothing. That is the Vision and Kittitian way. So when these youngsters are seeking to create something out of nothing, when a man will have the initiative to go on YouTube and teach himself chemistry and biology, and we call it botany, whatever to do with plants, in order for him to create something that he can then provide for his family, why are we still in 2025, December, criminalizing that? And as I said it, he said it is not for want of trying. He wants to get a license. He wants to apply. But he's having difficulty in terms of the process. How does he apply? Who does he apply to? You know, we created a leisure area in Nevis at Pinnes Beach. Quite a nice area. Madam Speaker, if you have not yet come, I would invite you to come. 9 bars, restaurants, and the like. And some of the business owners complained that youngsters were coming and sitting at the bar and smoking marijuana, which they did not like, and which other patrons did not like. And in our discussions with the police, we have said to them, well, why is this being allowed? Because as I understand the law, smoking marijuana in a public place like that is actually still an offense. And the response that came was really, Madam Speaker, a response that one may view as laughable. Because the response that came is that there's apparently some ticket book or ticket books that should be prepared so that the police can give these persons who try to smoke ganja in public a ticket. And it has been a very long time. In fact, I think it has been years since those ticket books had not been available. And then I'm advised that the ticket books eventually became available, but by the time they became available, there should have been an education campaign before the police started to issue these tickets, and that education campaign has not happened. So up and down the line, to me, we are not exhibiting the seriousness that I think this warrants. Again, I'm tying it to the efforts at diversification. Can cannabis provide us with jobs and opportunity? My answer is yes. When we look across the world, we see many examples. Canada, Uruguay. We see what has happened in places like California and other places. So there are opportunities here, and my humble suggestion, in fact, my plea to the government, please do what is necessary so that these youngsters are not being criminalized. They're not being harassed. They're not being locked up. They're not being charged. They're not facing jail time. Instead, put what is necessary in place to allow them to realize their ambitions of being an entrepreneur and of having the opportunity to start a business, as I say, in the age-old tradition of the Kittitian and Nivijaan people, pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. I want to move on from cannabis. But before I move on, I want to make a point. Because I believe everybody knows I'm a social media junkie. I don't shy away from it. I think that's where people are, and I engage people where they are. I was at the Marriott, Madam Speaker, and I came outside the Marriott, and there were some beautiful plants displayed at the Marriott. And I look at the plants, and I said, well, to my untrained eye, they look like marijuana plants. I say untrained because I don't want the public to think that I have any experience with the marijuana plant. So I said to my untrained eye. A young woman, very beautiful young woman, beckoned to me, and she said, come, come. So I said, what? And she said to me, this strain is called the Sheriff. I said, oh. And she said, yes, you must take a photo with it because this one is named after you. So I was flattered, and I ended up taking a photo with this ganja tree, which they say is called the Sheriff. And I posted that photo online, and I did so as a bit of a joke to say, imagine somebody called this thing Sheriff. And what I noted was that there was a significant level of backlash. And upon reflection, I said, I too am puzzled. Because here's what the backlash was. People were saying, how is it that somebody could have ganja at the Marriott, at a conference at the Marriott, displayed out in the hall? To the point where I am taking picture with the ganja plant. It is on display for the world to see. But others have the authorities coming into their backyards, uprooting their ganja plants, charging them, and subjecting them to prosecution. There appears to be that duality. Now, there may be a good explanation for it. I'm simply saying that where the public is concerned, it appears that some are allowed to have ganja and to have their ganja farm, and others are not allowed. And I believe that all the country is saying is, listen, let's just create a level playing field. I have said to the government time and time again that I favor the creation of the cannabis industry. If I had my way, I would just say, listen, we're going to create an industry across the board. Regulate it, tax it. I don't have my way. And I am cognizant that it may not be as easy as I'm making it appear, because you have issues of banking and proceeds of crime and all of that. You have to align all of these various concerns. But I believe that what we can do, at least in the interim, is to say to the security forces, listen, ease up on these youngsters. These youngsters are farmers. Let us view them as such. The Honorable Prime Minister, he came about 2-3 years ago. Violent crime in the country was raging. And he came, and I confess I'd never heard it said before, that he wanted to treat crime as a health issue. You all remember that? Public health issue. I didn't understand what he was talking about. But I say, sound good. So I went and I did some research, and I said, well, all right. Look at the results today, a few years on. It's one of the things I give the government high praise on, because I believe across the board we are safer and people are more comfortable in their homes and in their businesses. And so all that it took was a difference in perspective. That's all it took. And I'm saying, just as the government was able to say, listen, let us try to approach crime from a different angle. Why can't we not say the same to the youngsters about marijuana, especially those who are genuinely entrepreneurial and genuinely trying to do something to help themselves and their family? And by so doing, Madam Speaker, we can diversify the local economy. The Honorable Prime Minister, in his presentation, also spoke about geothermal. And again, I say kudos to him and his government, because I believe that he is the first Prime Minister who actually appreciates what geothermal can do for the future of St. Kitts and Nevis. I'm still on my diversification topic. I anticipate, Madam Speaker, that in time to come, this renewable energy can transform St. Kitts and Nevis. That whilst I'm here in 2025 bemoaning our dependence on citizenship by investment, we can create the type of economy which, in my opinion, is energy-based, except that unlike Norway, unlike Saudi Arabia, unlike Venezuela, this will be renewable energy-based. In my humble opinion, we should have invested in this a long time ago. When we do the math and we consider the hundreds of millions of dollars that we've paid to Delta and to Shell, and the hundreds of millions that we've paid for generating sets over the years, we could have had geothermal up and running, providing clean, reliable, cheap energy to the people of Nevis and St. Kitts. Now, finally, we have a government in Bastille that sees the benefit of this resource. And we have been working towards it. And I have said in this house, because I believe it to be true, that if geothermal was under the ground in Keon or in Molyneux, it would have been already operationalized. The difficulty, you see, is that the value of geothermal and the promise of geothermal has never been recognized because it's in Nevis. And I say so because, in my opinion, it is so. This is the first time that we have seen a government in Bastille that has said that regardless of where the resource is, we must look at this as a national imperative to develop this resource for the benefit of all. We have for far too long been consumed with parochialism, with islandism, with what belonged to me, and we have forgotten the development of the country. Everybody wants to be the king of their little castle. When, through cooperation, we could dominate this Caribbean region. And I don't say so lightly. We could, St. Kitts and Nevis has all the ingredients to bake the most fabulous cake. All. What do you make cake with? We got flour, we got fruits, we have sugar, egg, we have everything. I cook, I don't bake. The issue, Madam Speaker, is can we find the political will to bring these ingredients together in order to advance the country? You think, at the end of the day, that the householder up in village cares that the energy that she is consuming is being generated from the earth in Nevis? I am prepared to posit that what that single mother in the village cares about is that she has reliable electricity and that it's cheap and she could afford to power up her home. What is a small businessman in Keon interested in? That the power is coming from Nevis? No. And we have for far too long. In fact, I was in a government. And when I am out there advocating for geothermal to be developed in Nevis, people in that same government were sending a conflicting message. In fact, the then Minister of Utilities, not the good member for number 5, he came later. The then member who was the Minister for Utilities sought to engage a French company called Terranov and sought to engage Terranov to develop geothermal on St. Kitts. Whilst all the science and all the research shows that the resource in Nevis was there and ready to be developed. And I recall seeing the proposed MOU from Terranov. I saw it as I used to see some things in that government by a side wind. Sometimes when you're out in the yard, somebody throws something out the window. And when I saw the proposed MOU with Terranov, it had a clause in it that shocks me to this day. It said that the federal government would be prohibited from purchasing any energy from Nevis. That was the nature of the thinking of people in the same government. Every Monday we sit down in a cabinet and negotiating an agreement with Terranov, a French company, that you'll develop geothermal in St. Kitts and that the federal government will be barred, prohibited from purchasing any power from Nevis. We're not talking about Antigua and Nevis, you know. We're not talking about Jamaica and Nevis. We're talking about St. Kitts and Nevis, which the last time I checked was the same country. That is what was happening. And that is why I say I give credit to this government, because they have recognized that this is a resource that can not only help all of us, but importantly, back to my theme of diversification, can diversify this economy. Can you imagine, Madam Speaker, the new jobs that can be created? The new industries that can be created? The downstream uses of energy. In fact, Nevis is in a position of energy excess. What I mean by that is, the scientists are telling us that we have far more energy than we can consume locally. So it means that once we've supplied all of Nevis and supplied all of St. Kitts, we still have power left over. So you then open up a whole world of possibilities. Is there an opportunity to export power to neighboring islands? Is there an opportunity for downstream uses, large data centers, major centers for job creation, developments? That is what we're talking about when we talk about diversification. Let me move on from geothermal. And I want to speak to the Sustainable Economic Zone. The letters SSZ have become now more popular than even ABC. Everybody's talking about SSZ. And I love when I'm in St. Kitts to walk around. I hope I'm not being unparliamentary when I say I refer to St. Kitts as sexy St. Kitts. I love to walk around. That is unparliamentary? You've ruled on it. Well, I apologize. I apologize. The country is voluptuous. Well shaped. Madam Speaker, I like to walk around St. Kitts. I like to engage. And I was at Port Zante, and I think a ship or two were in. So there was some activity. And a couple of the taxi drivers descended on me, stakeholders. I spoke to perhaps 6 or so. 5 of them were very vocal and say they support the SSZ, they support the idea of this development coming to Nevis, they want some in St. Kitts too. Very exuberant. A 6th was very negative. And he came to me and he said to me, "You're selling off Nevis land. You need to stop it." And I said to him, but in truth, the government in Nevis is not selling any land. All the lands currently at issue for a proposed development in Nevis are private lands. And I then turned to him and said, "Could any government tell you that you can't sell your private land?" He said, "No. Nobody could tell me that." And then he reflected and paused for a moment, and then he said to me, "By the way, I have some land in Nevis I'm trying to sell." And I say that anecdotally, of course, but it captures what I consider to be the debate. And let's face it, we live in a robust democracy, and democracies can sometimes be robust and raucous. And so people have an opinion. I have said that my job as Premier of Nevis and my job as a member of this Honorable House is really to provide people with the facts. Not to spin anything, but to provide them with the facts. And one of the difficulties that I have had in this whole debate about the Sustainable Economic Zone and the legislation that we passed in this very House, with my support. So I own it because I supported it. The difficulty that I had is that those, Madam Speaker, who are opposing at the tops of their voices have not offered one alternative idea. I challenge anybody in this House and in this country to point out to me any individual who has been out there pontificating in the public space. Has he or she offered the country one alternative? You say, it is very easy to sit in the cheap seats and criticize. I was never a good cricketer. But I know a lot of people who sit down in the pavilion and they always know what shot the batsman must play. They always know what line the bowler must bowl. But throw them the ball and tell them, go out there and bowl. Give them the bat, tell them put on your pads. Pad up. Not them. I had an exchange with a cousin of mine. And he said to me that he will fight this idea of an SSZ with every fiber of his body. And I said to him, all right, what do you propose as an alternative then for economic activity and diversification in the country? I don't know what the numbers are like for St. Kitts, but I would imagine they're exponentially higher. But in Nevis, Madam Speaker, we are graduating each year from our high schools and our sixth form over 200 young people. In 5 years, that's over 1,000 young people. What are we as government, and I'm using that as a collective, to tell these young people? They must move to America. They must move to Canada. They must try to get into the USVI. Or do we have a responsibility to create opportunities right here in our country for them? What do we tell the youngster who borrows money from the Development Bank or from National Bank and goes away to study, and having studied cannot come back to his country to make a contribution because there are no opportunities here for that youngster? And have we ever stopped to consider that absent development, we are failing our young people? Not people like me. I have now more years behind me than ahead of me. We must start to think about those who are coming. Because we understand, all of us in this parliament, some a little younger, some a little older, but all of us in this parliament, we are only placeholders, you know. Madam Speaker, that's all we are. We are placeholders. We occupy the stage for a time, we make our contribution, and then we move on and allow the stage to be occupied by others. That's the nature of life. So whilst we are on the stage, a question that we must ask ourselves, what do we say to these young people? When you go to a graduation and you see these youngsters in their cap and gown, and you say, boy, 250 come out. I'm talking Nevis alone. St. Kitts has to be 3 times, 4 times that. Is government going to employ all of them? Is Marriott, Park Hyatt, and Four Seasons going to employ all of them? We need opportunities. And opportunities can only come from an expanding economic landscape. Opportunities only come from a diversified economy. And that really is the point. The reason why I supported this idea of the SSG legislation is because I said to myself that year after year I come in and I said to the government, you must do more to diversify the local economy. And this is one of the responses that the government has come with. Now I hear the noise. They say, in fact, I was in a meeting, because in Nevis we have had a number of stakeholder engagements. We probably have, what, a dozen or more. And I heard in one of the meetings a young woman say, oh, you all rushed through this legislation and had 3 readings in a single sitting. And the young woman was a lawyer. Not that lawyers are better positioned than anyone else, but I would have assumed that lawyers are more cognizant of differentiating fact from fiction. And I said to her, no, that is not the case. The Attorney General may be in a much better position to speak to this. But I did not detect that there was anything unusual about the pace at which this legislation was handled. The legislation came on a first reading. I don't have the dates, but I recall. And it came back a few weeks later for debate. That's a standard operating procedure. So where was this myth created that this was done first, second, and third reading, one sitting, and nobody had a chance to look at it? It is absolutely untrue. But what I've realized in this country is that there's some out there who are bent on mischief. And our people have become, dare I use the word, lazy, intellectually lazy. We look now for information from sound bites, from some radio host or somebody of that nature. When this SSC legislation was debated, a gentleman in Nevis reached out to me and said to me that he was quite upset with me. And I said, why? And he said, you went down to St. Kitts and passed legislation that will allow the government to take away people's land and give it to white people. I said, oh, where in the legislation does it say that? Oh, yes, that's what you all did. So I said, well, the legislation, if I recall, was about 8 or 9 pages. Easy reading. I sent it to him. I said, read it for yourself. When you finish reading it, let's have a conversation. Come back, he tell me that he not read nothing. But he had got his information from whoever on the radio. And that is what has happened in the country now, that we're not taking the time. A young woman, young civil servant in Nevis, reached out to me and she said, some of the things that I'm hearing about this legislation, I can't believe it. So you know what I did, Madam Speaker? I invited her to go on YouTube, because now if you miss the house, it's no problem, you know. You go back and you'll watch it at your leisure. When you're washing your dishes, you put on YouTube and you're listening. You're cooking, you're listening. I asked the lady, I said, go back. The lady said she listened to the Honorable Prime Minister on that bill. She listened to me. And then she said she understood. The problem we have in our country is that our people are not taking the time to inform themselves. And if you're not informed, you're easily misled. And that is why in a formal setting, a lawyer can say to me, you all rush through the thing, 3 readings in one sitting. And I had to correct that. That is why this young man could say to me that the government passed a law to take away people's land and give it to white people. Because he had not read anything. He had not listened to the debate. He simply was regurgitating whatever was said by some talk show host. And I keep using this platform to say that it is utterly useless for us as a country to boast that we have 99% literacy if we refuse to read. What's the point of being literate if you refuse to read? It's important as a people that we inform ourselves. When I hear the discussion as if we in St. Kitts and Nevis are embarked on some frolic that is unknown to the rest of the world, by mooting the idea of having special economic zones, and I say, but Jamaica's had them since the 1960s. Costa Rica, Panama, Dubai, all of us run into Dubai. All of us. Remember, for number 6 is in here, you know, he speaks Arabic. Spend so much time there. We're going to Dubai. Dubai now is a place where people are going for their honeymoon and their excursions. But Dubai has one of the most successful zones, the DIFC. And so you say to people, listen, inform yourself. That is all. At the end of informing yourself, you may well still say you do not agree with a particular approach. And that is fine. It's called democracy. But inform yourself. People say, oh, these zones are going to have their own law. Every zone in the world has its own law. I don't say that because I'm trying to be controversial. That's why it's called special. It's called a special zone because it has special rules that apply inside that zone to attract development or investment of a particular kind. It could be technology. It could be business. It could be hotels. The DIFC, Dubai International Financial Center. You know what legal system applies within the DIFC, Madam Speaker? The common law of England. The rest of Dubai, the rest of the UAE has Sharia law or the Napoleonic Code. But within the confines of the DIFC, they have imported the common law of England with their own system for dispute resolution. Why? Because the government there thought that this was an appropriate way to attract foreign investment and give foreign investors some greater comfort to have something with which they were perhaps more familiar. And it has now evolved as one of the most successful zones in the world. Just last night, I went to an establishment here because I was trying to figure out how I can get enough material to last for 4 hours today. So I took a little drive in Frigate Bay. And I went to a particular establishment. And a young man approached me. And he said, I support this SSZ. Get it done. We need some of that in St. Kitts too. Let's get these things going. And then he said to me, have you ever considered that the problem that you're facing is the word zone? I said, zone? He said, yes, that's the problem. You know, people don't like the idea that you're saying it's a zone. It sounds like it's separate. It's apart. And I said, but perhaps this young man has a point, Because some of the things that people have been claiming, local people will not be able to go in. It will be cut off from the rest of the island. Fishermen will not be able to go in the water. You can't swim in the sea anymore. And I said to myself, where on earth are these nonsensical expressions coming from? And I can't characterize them in any other way. Where are they coming from? Oh, you're going to create a state within a state. That is constitutional heresy. I used to be a lawyer, and I can tell you, there's no concept known to law as a state within a state. The only examples that I know that come even close is like the Vatican, which has a special arrangement. But that is the type of expression that we have. And the thing that bothers me, people that we look to, whom we might ordinarily describe as sensible people, are the ones out there making the most noise. Someone reached out to me and said, do you know that the proponent of this is a libertarian? I said, what does that mean? He likes liberty? Because I don't know. He likes to be free. Well, if that's the case, I'm a libertarian too. Because I like liberty. And I like to be free. And all of a sudden, people are saying that as government, we must now start to examine what people's beliefs are, as opposed to, Madam Speaker, examining what is proposed. So I asked the question rhetorically. I like to do that. Do we know what Bill Gates believes? Bill Gates owns Four Seasons in Nevis. Anybody ever asked him whether they believe in God? Whether he's a libertarian? Whether he's a communist? Does anybody care? Do the 800 people who make a living out of Four Seasons care? Because once we start to introduce these anomalous ideas about what people believe, who believe in God and who don't believe in God, who's Muslim and who's Hindu, as a precursor for development, we run ourselves into problems. And so when I have said to our people, why are we going down a road? When we do due diligence on investors that are coming into Nevis, and let me speak for Nevis, we run them through the checking agencies. And once it comes back, Madam Speaker, to say they have no criminal record, they have no criminal associations, they've not been charged or suspected of any. What else? I'm going to start to ask, are they Christian? How often do they go to church? Are they vegan? Are they LGBTQ+? How are those questions now germane to the issue of development? And whether you have a proposal in front of you that makes sense. And that, I think, is where I have parted company with some of those who are out there pontificating. The SSZ, in my opinion, and I supported it then and I support it now, is an effort at diversifying the local economy. If all the indications from the Weather Channel tell us that there's a hurricane coming off the coast of Africa, it behooves us to prepare ourselves. And if all the indications currently tell us that CBI is in trouble, then it behooves us to prepare ourselves. And the only way that we can prepare ourselves is to develop alternatives. It doesn't matter that people are out there talking. They say talk is cheap, whiskey costs money. But I ask everyone out there who's talking, please therefore provide an alternative. And that's when the silence comes. Because the easiest thing to do in the world is to criticize somebody else. That's easy. All of us have a PhD in criticism. But what are the ideas? What do you suggest as an alternative? How can we move this country forward? How can I, as Premier of Nevis, how can the Prime Minister, how can any parliamentarian, any constituency representative look at those young people in the eye who are coming out of CFBC, coming out of CSS in Nevis, and say to them, yes, you can stay here, there's a future for you in your country. And if we cannot do that, we are failing them. So all this chatter that I'm hearing, this chatter from the cheap seats, they have no obligation. They have no responsibility. And the most dangerous thing in the world is a man who can speak but has no responsibility. Because that means he can say anything. And so, I support this effort at diversification. And I say one last thing on it. That we should not confuse the legislation passed in this House with any particular proposal for development that has come. I see people saying repeal the SSZ because they have concerns over a particular development that is proposed. That is nonsensical. It is nonsensical because any developer can come with a proposal. Once he or she can satisfy the requirements of the legislation, all the legislation does is creates a framework. That's it. And it is then for the government, whether here in Bastia or in Charlestown, to evaluate proposals and determine whether or not those proposals can advance our joint quest for national development. That's really all that this is, Madam Speaker. And so we are not to confuse the two, the legislation and any particular proposal that may come to the country. Proposals can be accepted, they can be rejected. But that doesn't mean that the legislation is bad. We have had a number of projects proposed in the country in the past, and we've turned down many of them. That's not what we want. So I believe that it is important that in the public debate that is quite properly happening, that we have a sensible and grounded debate, a debate based on fact, not fiction. And so on the issue of diversification, as I move from my point number one, I want to recap that I encourage a more sensible approach to cannabis. I encourage us to move with haste on the geothermal project. And I encourage us to see the sustainable economic zones as a good faith effort at further diversifying this economy. Madam Speaker, I attended recently the 40th anniversary of the Bank of Nevis. And one who spoke there, I can call his name, called Hansel Manners, he read a poem. And he made a point that 40 years ago, when Sir Simeon Daniel, our national hero, proposed the Bank of Nevis, that there was significant opposition. Many referred to it in quite derogatory terms as Sim's Bank. They say Sim and his family are going to benefit from it. They're not going to put their money there. Today, 40 years on, it's the second largest bank in St. Kitts and Nevis. And it is worth, they say now, over $1 billion. What if Sim had listened to those? What if the approach by our leaders then was simply to put their finger in the wind to see where the wind was blowing and go wherever the wind blows? That they were like flotsam or jetsam on the ocean, just going with the tide. Is that the type of leadership that the country wants? Or does the country need leadership that has vision? Leadership that can sometimes see where others cannot see. Simeon Daniel 40 years ago saw that Nevis needed a Bank of Nevis. He could not even find local investors. People weren't interested. Said it was nonsense. So he went up to the States. And he went to England. And he found new visions out there. And he asked them to invest. He got 10 people, Madam Speaker, to put in $25,000 each. That's how the Bank of Nevis was started. What if he had listened to those loud voices? Those empty barrels that go clang, 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 clang. But at the end of the day, they don't have a thing to offer the country. Because you see, success has many fathers. When you're successful, everybody and the cousin want to take credit. But at the time, and I could say the same thing about Sir Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw. I did not know him. But I'm told that when he introduced Social Security, there were many who opposed to the idea. When compulsory secondary education was introduced in St. Kitts and Nevis, many were opposed to the idea. When the Four Seasons Resort was coming to Nevis, they said we're selling out to white man. People ask the question where they're going to pick their coconut now. And where they're going to catch crab. Because they said the hotel is going to take up that land. "30 years later, the Four Seasons has provided a living to thousands of Division families. Thousands of youngsters have gone off to school. Thousands of families have built a home. Because somebody said, we're going to build a hotel. And people still catching crab, you're right. Somebody said we're going to build a hotel. The reason I'm saying these things, you see, is because the nature of man is such that what is criticized today, where odium and contempt are heaped upon ideas today, 20, 30 years down the road, you start to praise those people and call them Messiah. The way that they spoke about Sim Daniel at the Bank of Nevis Gala, I say a little bit again, they will call him Jesus. Because all of a sudden he was so great. But guess what? You know they voted out Sim in Nevis, you know. Some people forget that. He who we now call Messiah, he who we now celebrate as a national hero, he whom we now say had such vision, was voted out. But look at the legacy. And that is why I keep consoling myself with the reality that sometimes, Madam Speaker, we don't always see into the future. We don't always see into the distance. We see what is right here in front of us. And I end that section by asking that question of us all. Absent vision for our country, how are we going to survive? Absent new ideas, how are we to survive? I mentioned the citizenship by investment. I'm going to get back to it. In 1984, that was a novel idea. The world had not yet seen that. St. Kitts Nevis gave it to the world. Look at it today. Every country in the world is trying to do some version of citizenship by investment. You think back in 1984, everybody was in favor of it? Or saw it as a good thing? I'm pretty sure someone radio the same way, cussing and abusing and carrying on. They wasn't Facebook then. Look at St. Vincent even now. New government in St. Vincent. And one of the first things they say they're going to do is what? Introduce a CBI program. Madam Speaker, these are important statements to make in these hallowed halls. Because nothing great has ever been achieved by timid people. We must dare to dream and dream big. We must dare to look beyond the horizon. And in fact, I say in this house that it is not an option. It is a necessity for small island states to dream big and to look beyond the horizon. You remind me, of course. A saying that I am now adopting as my personal mantra, that you will never know what is in the ocean if you are afraid to leave the shore. We'll never know. We can sit down here in this house and mark time, collect a little pay, do whatever we do, but transformative things for the country. Developments that 15, 20, 40 years from now, people will look back and say, that was transformative for the country. It requires us to dream and to dream big dreams. And so I will leave that there. And I want to look at a question that for me is a vexed question. That of the Citizenship by Investment program, more broadly. And just because I said I would get to the evidence, because I recall my days as a lawyer, evidence was always important. I've looked at, Madam Speaker, the audit report that was kindly provided to us yesterday. And the audit report says to us, at page 6 thereof, in the middle of the page, as at December 31st, 2024, actual revenue totaled $807 million, and actual expenditure amounted to $1.069 billion, which resulted in an end-of-year deficit of $261 million. Now, when we look at that, and we look at the following pages, we go over to page 8. It says the total revenue collected during 2024 totaled $807 million, which was $334 million less than the amount collected in 2023. Actual tax revenue of $444 million collected in 2024 increased by $7 million when compared to 2023. Non-tax revenue of $311 million decreased by $379 million in comparison to 2023. You see those words, non-tax? You could substitute that with CBI. Generally, broadly speaking, we're talking about a Citizenship by Investment program. And what we're therefore seeing, Madam President, is really the evidence, that's all I'm pointing to, of the point that I sought to make earlier, of the over-reliance. Once you see CBI starts to trend down, the government finances start to suffer. I'm going to come back to that. But I want to move on to something else. Madam Speaker, I want to spend a moment or two speaking about this issue of fair share. It is language that I have, in part, popularized, and my party, the Concerned Citizens Movement, has popularized. And I want to start by saying that on the 17th of December in the year of our Lord 2014, 3 political parties came together. I saw the good Sam Conde was here. I'm sorry, he has left. 3 parties came together on the 17th of December 2014, and we signed something called the Charleston Accord. The signatories to that document were Dr. Timothy Harris, leader of the PLP, a good member for St. Christopher 7, who was absented himself, all budget thus far. The Honorable Vance Emery, of blessed memory, who was leader of the CCM. And the Honorable Sean Richards, a good member for St. Kitts 5, St. Christopher 5, the leader then of the People's Action Movement. They sat down and they signed a document. What did that document say? It set out a blueprint for how what was described as team unity would function. And a central plank of that blueprint was the question of a share of the CBI revenues. The document was clear. You know how I know it was clear? I drafted it. It set out a formula. And it said that the people of Nevis would receive a portion of the CBI revenues on a pro rata population basis. Them sound like big words. It just means that we will get a percentage based on the population. So if Nevis has 25% of the population, Nevis will get 25% of the money. St. Kitts has 75%, St. Kitts gets 75%. That was 2014. Some may well ask, and one thing about me, at this stage in my life, I'm all about the record. Record is important. Some may well ask, why did the Concerned Citizens Movement, a party which has traditionally not aligned itself with any party in St. Kitts, why did that party take that step in 2012 and following, which culminated in this Charleston Accord in 2014? And to understand in part, we must go to the history of the matter. So let us look at the record. I will start in 2010 to create some context. 2010, Madam Speaker, the Citizenship by Investment Program brought into this country $140.9 million. The island of Nevis got zero. Not, nothing, nada, zilch, whichever word you prefer. That's what Nevis got in 2010. 2011, Citizenship by Investment brought in $241.9 million. The island of Nevis got naught, zero, zilch, nada, nothing. 2012, CBI brought in $246.3 million. The island of Nevis got $11.1 million. 2013, CBI brought in $391.3 million. The island of Nevis got $8.2 million out of $391.3. 2014, CBI brought in $414.4 million. The island of Nevis got $4.1 million out of $414.4 million. 2015, the year that the government changed, CBI brought in $379.8 million. And the island of Nevis, for the first time, got $25 million out of that. I'm going to pause there. Because I think sometimes that the nation doesn't understand the dynamics that lead to the political realities that happen in the country. We in Nevis, as proud Nevisians, as representatives of the people of Nevis, kept saying to the then federal government, led by the member for St. Christopher 6 at the time, that it was unfair, that the Citizenship by Investment Program was generating revenue at this scale and the people of Nevis were locked out and could not get anything. And that is the context, Madam Speaker, behind the decision taken by the CCM to join with the PLP, which was, as we know, disaffected Labour, and with the People's Action Movement to form Team Unity. It is for that reason that the Charleston Accord specifically, in 3 different paragraphs of that document, made reference to the pro rata share of these proceeds. And it is for that reason that starting in 2015, the people of Nevis started to get a little something from the proceeds of CBI. But, Madam Speaker, I'm not going to just leave it there. I'm asking for a little latitude because I hear a lot of conversation about this matter. And the government changed in 2015. And I, as a politician, did my utmost to change the government. No politician before me in modern memory has taken a fishing boat in the dead of night to come down here to go on a platform in St. Kitts. I came down with colleagues. We went on the platform down here. We said we needed to fight against this injustice to the people of Nevis. And Team Unity promised better. You know, some have criticized me. They say that I have a relationship with the Honorable Prime Minister and this government, and that I ought not to be talking to them because I'm in opposition. And I'm roundly criticized and chastised because if I take a picture with a good gentleman and the two of us smile, they say, watch them, they're my friend. And apparently in some quarters we're supposed to be enemies. But I want to remind this House and remind this nation that the Honorable Dr. Terence Drew and the Labour Party never promised me anything. They never promised the CCM anything. In fact, the record will show that the CCM fought against Labour. I'm not here to say anything that is untrue. That's what the record will show. Who promised me something? Who promised Nevis something? Who promised CCM something? Was Team Unity. And I fought tooth and nail to elevate the good member for number 7, who has absented himself from the House thus far. When they used to say, the sheriff coming, or the good member used to, he like to wind up. Wind up himself. Love to hear that. Hope that is not unparliamentary. And there was no issue then, because you see, it served a purpose in elevating personal ambition. And my request, and the request of the people of Nevis, was a fairly simple request. Treat us fairly. That was it. Every one of us in this house understands what it is like to be unfairly treated. Those of us who say we are Christian understand that fairness is an integral part of Christian ideal. It's an integral part of how we relate to one another as brothers and sisters. Fairness. And all that the people of Nevis have asked for is a fair share of the resources of the country. You know, Madam Speaker, I became Premier of Nevis in 2017. And I sat in a government of national unity, which year after year, surplus again. And I'm in Nevis living on overdraft. Borrowing to pay public servants in Nevis, to fix roads in Nevis. to get water for the people of Nevis, electricity for the people of Nevis. And over here, surplus again. But the surplus was not coming from any expansion in the Sinkers economy. The surplus was coming from that torrent of cash rushing down College Street called CBI. And I will go to the numbers. I say that to say that it was misleading for there to be any suggestion that there was wholesale economic expansion or wholesale economic activity. The reality was that even whilst we were fast asleep in our beds, Citizenship by Investment was earning money. And that allowed some of us to stand up and say, surplus again. But in Nevis, we were being given a pittance. When we got in 2015, I learned later that we started to get $2 million a month. $2 million a month. To put it in context in this house, the wage bill in Nevis approximates almost $10 million a month. You're getting $2 million a month. And then as time went on, I was not the leader then, but certainly after I became the leader of Nevis, I started to say, well, this is not what we agreed. This is not what everybody signed to. On the 17th, let me get the date right, on the 17th of December 2014, this was not the understanding that we all had that catapulted some to the heights of fame and power in the country. Well, if you get what you wanted, well, how come now the people of Nevis can't get what they wanted? Today's the 17th? Look at the irony. I lived long enough in this country to hear the man that benefited most from the Charleston Accord to say that no matter what Charleston Accord them talk about. This is our lived reality. In Nevis, the old people say ungratefulness is worse than witchcraft. That is our lived reality, that you can sign a document with no intentions ever to honor what was agreed to. So some people want me now to cuss Dr. Drew. And I said, well, Dr. Drew never signed a document with me. Dr. Drew never came to Nevis and said to the people of Nevis, this is what I am going to give to you if you support my ascendancy. He never did that. So how am I going to vex with him? I must vex with who promised me and who did not deliver. And now I hear some of them out there spinning. Spinning. So I'm going to go to the tape. 2015, CBI brought in $379.8 million. Nevis got 25. These are the unity years now. 2016, $266.4 million came in. Nevis got 35.2. 2017, $221.4 million came in. Nevis got 60.7 million. 2018, $418 million came in. Nevis got 52.7 million. 2019, $443 million came in. Nevis got 40 million. 2020, $270.8 million came in. Nevis got 55. 2021, in the middle of COVID, $542.5 million came in through CBI. Nevis got 54. And then in 2022, the banner year for CBI in the country, $669.3 million came in. Nevis got 74.5. I'm going to stop there for the moment. The reason I'm going to stop there is because in my engagements with this government, I have said to them, listen, notwithstanding that you never sign any agreement with me, and notwithstanding that I try my best to make sure you wouldn't be in government, because those are the facts, I campaigned against you. there is still the question of fairness for the people of Nevis. The Prime Minister said to me that there was in train already an engagement with the World Bank to produce an analysis of the position. I personally did not agree. Because this whole World Bank analysis was something which the former Prime Minister initiated, but he did so, in my humble opinion, to kick the can down the road. I remember making a speech and saying that any sixth form student could work out this money. Because to me, it's an easy math. If $100 comes in and you spend 10 as expenses, 90 is left, you divide the 90 based on the population. Nevis get 25, Singers get 75. I don't need the World Bank to tell me that. But I said, all right, the process is in train. Let's see. And what did the World Bank come back and say? They offered different scenarios. But if I can summarize, in my humble opinion, the World Bank came back to the same thing, pro rata share. And the Honorable Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, called me and he said to me, listen, let's agree that we're going to do 75-25. Now, why do I speak to that now? I speak to that now, Madam Speaker, because whilst now we have come to an accord, maybe I ought not to use that word, whilst now we have come to an understanding, an agreement, that Nevis is going to get 25%. The question is 25% of what? Because if, as I have said, that CBI inflows are dropping, then it clearly means now that you're getting 25% of a much lower number. And that in turn means that certainly at this point in time, the island of Nevis is getting less in terms of actual money coming to Nevis. And so I've heard the usual nattering nabobs of extreme negativism. Those who are schooled in negativity. They have taken to the airwaves and they have said, oh, Mark did a bad thing because look now Nevis is getting less. And they misunderstand that the fundamental premise of Nevis's agitation over the years was simply to have a formula. Not that it be based on who's sitting in the Prime Minister's chair or who's sitting in the Premier's chair, just to have a formula. So any government, long after I'm gone, could know that if a dollar comes in from CBI, you can look forward to 25 cents. That is all that we were seeking to do. Some people seem to feel that it was about me. It was never about me. It was about having a formula where there could be some reliability in terms of what happens in the country. So, this government has now agreed at 25%. But, you know, I like to go to the numbers. So I said to myself, well, let's go back to 2010. And I read out the numbers already. Hansard would have recorded them. I will not repeat them. But let's go back to 2010 and count up how much CBI has brought into St. Kitts and Nevis from 2010 to 2025. 15 years? In that 15-year span, and let me say it slowly, the Citizenship by Investment Program has brought in $5,722,900,000 into Bastia. $5,722,900,000. Of that, the island of Nevis has received $609.5 million. That's what Nevis and the people of Nevis has received. And included in that are double salaries that were paid 2016, 17, 18, 19, additional salaries in 2022, etc. When we look then at the life from 2010 to 2025 of CBI, $5.7 billion has come into the country. Of that, Nevis has got 10.7%. Based on the last census, Madam Speaker, Nevis has roughly 28% of the population. But we got 10.7%. And I remind the House that there were some years when we got nothing at all. St. Kitts got 89.3% of those monies during that 15-year period. Little Nevis got 10.7. Now I ask the question, what if those in Bastia, going back to 2010 and thereafter, had agreed that we will just do the pro rata share that we had been asking for? And so I went back to the math. And I said, had we received 25% going back to 2010, instead of $609.5 million, Nevis would have got $1.43 billion. It therefore means that includes, I've already included all the provision for double salary. So the only salaries that are paid federally are federal responsibility like national security. Every other salary in Nevis is paid by the Nevis Island Administration. So it means, therefore, that had we applied a pro rata basis since back in 2010, I haven't even gone back further in history, I'm starting at 2010, the people of Nevis would have benefited from $1.43 billion. Instead, we got $609 million. It means that, what the word that is popular in our reparations? Reparations. Is $821.23 million that we were denied in Nevis over those 15 years. Now, my debt in Nevis right now is just about $500 million. You realize that Nevis would have no debt? What the word? Yeah, poof. You realize that our hospital would have been finished? Airport finished? All of those things done? Instead of that, the people of Nevis up there living on fumes, borrowing money. When $821.23 million was what we could have got had there been an equitable share. Prime Minister used the word yesterday. So you don't want equity. You don't want equal, he wants equity. But let me, because I don't want to move on from this point just yet. Let's look at the unity years, 2015 to 2022. And in those years, I said publicly that it was the best that Nevis ever fared, because it was true. Well, if you used to get nothing, you start to get $10. It's better than not, right? But it was equally true that Nevis was not getting what had been committed to. The two things could be true. That you're doing better than you used to do, but you're still not getting what was agreed to. And so for that period of 2015 to 2022, when I sat in a government, that I fought to put in government, under the Unity Administration, the country earned $3.2 billion from citizenship by investment. That was the heyday of CBI. 2015 to 2022. $3.2 billion. Of that, the island of Nevis got $396.9 million, representing 12.4%. That's what we got. 12.4%. Again, had we had what was promised to us which was the pro rata share, Nevis would have got $800 million during that 7-year period. Again, debt gone. Airport done. Hospital done. And we got something in the bank. But that was denied to us. They kept saying, man, hold this for now. Hold this while we work it out. Hold this while we work it out. Well, how much longer they want me to hold this while we work it out? In the dying stages of that government, 2022, I said this $3.5 million a month is inadequate, and it went to 5.5 in the dying stages of the Team Unity government. And that is all because Nevis was told, hold this. I'm going to give you a fixed amount every month. And so you're getting 2, then 3.5, then 5.5 per month. And it doesn't matter that the country is bringing in 100 million, 200 million, 300 million. You hold this until we get to it. Well, after I didn't go to Saturday school, how long must the people of Nevis hold this? How long? 7 years we were told, hold this. Are coming. Then we were told, World Bank got to look at it, Mark, these things not easy. World Bank gonna got to take a look, Mark, take it easy. But while I'm taking it easy, surplus again. Double again. And the money outside there run like crazy. And we over there in Nevis looking over. What are we, second-class citizens? My passport says St. Christopher and Nevis, just like everybody else's passport. So when we talk from Nevis, I want people to understand, and I want the nation to understand. I don't want nobody to feel sorry for me, I'm making the case because the case has to be made, and sometimes it seems to me that the facts of what has happened in this country are ignored. During Team Unity era, had we honored our commitment, the people of Nevis would have received $1.1 billion as opposed to the $396 million that we got. And I must say a word about it, and I hope, because I did say I won't be too long, that my colleagues will follow up for me. Because while I was getting a pittance of what was flowing, they had the audacity to say to me that I spend bad. Remember that? Yeah, man. They say I'm a bad spender. You're giving me the beer crumbs. And they say I'm a bad spender. But you know what I spent the money on, Madam Speaker? Water. Electricity. I spent over $50 million upgrading water in Nevis. New storage capacity. We now have 3.3 million gallons of storage capacity. And we're about to add another 600,000 shortly. We dig up the whole island. We put in new polyurethane pipes all across Nevis. Removed those old cast iron pipes. We invested in machinery, a butt fusion machine. We trained our people. And when we had upgraded in Nevis, now you don't have no low water pressure anymore. Water bus pipe. We upgraded the water storage. We upgraded the water distribution. And then, you know what we did? We said we need more water. We have a small desalination plant already commissioned that the United Arab Emirates donated. One to St. Kitts, one to Nevis. The one in Nevis already putting water into the system. We negotiated with a company out of Trinidad to come and drill 9 more wells for us. That is an ongoing project now. We are, through those measures, adding 1.5 to 2 million gallons of additional water per day on the island of Nevis. So we've invested in storage, phase 1. We invested in distribution, phase 2. We are now investing in more water, phase 3. That is what bad spending in Nevis looked like. When I'm over there and I'm under my hot shower, I call my partner Kia and he said, boy, me don't have beer out of bucket. I ain't talked to him recently. I believe that these things have to be viewed in context, you know. Because you hear what I say. $3.2 billion in 7 years. And no water. No investment. When I hear the honorable member for Nevis Street, Sinkett Street, forgive me, say that they're renting generators at Skellig to provide electricity to the people of Sinkett. In the last decade, Nevis bought not 1, not 2, but 3 generators we bought in Nevis. And we were told that we were bad spenders because from the pittance that we got, we invested in the sustainable future of our people. In Nevis now, if electricity gone off, somebody must have an accident and knock down a pole. Reliable power, reliable water. With reliable water, your farmers could now have confidence that they could farm. Your businesses can now set up, knowing that water not get turned off. In Nevis right now, if water go off for half an hour, people start to go on like crazy people. We're not accustomed to that. We're not accustomed. The good member for number 3 says soon. But could you imagine if I had get the money that I was supposed to get? The bad spending in Nevis would have been even on a different scale. I would have been sending water to Sinkett. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot on the one hand attack me and Nevis and say that we are these terrible managers. When you gave us the bare minimum, you gave us nothing close to what we had negotiated and agreed. And then with that minimum we have demonstrated, not talked about, demonstrated what we have done with it. And you on the other hand have done nothing. And I've said so in this house. Some people may not like it when I say it, you know, but I've said so. I wonder sometimes if you ask the people of the country, do you prefer to get a double salary? Do you prefer to get a little extra money? Or do you want water in your pipe? Do you want electricity in your home? Do you want roads and infrastructure? I'm not sure what the answer is going to be. But I may wager that some may say, give me the extra money. And let me catch water to bathe. Let me have water in jug and bucket and bath pan. One of the young people know when they're in bath pan. Madam Speaker, I don't say these things lightly. I say these things because there are some in some quarters who are trying to rewrite the history of these 2 islands. And I'm going to stand up in every forum and defend our stewardship in Nevis. I'm going to defend the decision that we took. I'm going to defend what we did. Because we have always advocated for the best interests of our people. And I want to make that pellucid. I want to finish off by saying that since this administration has been in office, in 2023, we had $620.7 million came in from CBI. Nevis got 70.7. 2024, 244.2 million. Nevis got 66. And in 2025, thus far, 106 million has come in. Nevis has got 52.3. Sorry. Oh, you're on a point of, forgive me. So, Madam Speaker, the amounts that had been allocated to Nevis since 2022 was fixed at the 5.5 million a month, forgive me, were continued by the new administration. And we have now come to an arrangement that we will move to a percentage basis. The value, in my opinion, of the percentage basis is that when times are good, everybody is going to benefit. And when times are not so good, everybody will take less and get less. But at least it will be proportional. And that, in my humble opinion, is the best way to demonstrate fairness. Of course, as I say, the pro rata share has now come when less is coming in. So I understand that the people of Nevis are going to get less. And I therefore reiterate the point that there has and ought to be some kind of look back to also examine what it is Nevis ought rightly to have obtained during that time. And so, when we look at the years that are concerned to me, what I call the unity years, instead of our 25, 26, 27% pro rata share, Nevis got 12.4%. And I was no longer content with this notion of hold that for now. Hold that for now. Hold that for now. I want to go on to make some other very quick points. I've been having some conversations on and off with the business community. And, Madam Speaker, there's a suggestion that it is time for us to look realistically at tax reform in the country. I say that we ought to look at tax reform because there has been a pattern that has emerged that every time there is a VAT relief day, the business places are inundated with customers. And whilst I'm in no position, because I've not had the benefit of a study myself, I'm urging the government to look at the possibility of whether instead of these days each year for VAT relief, we ought not now to look and see whether we can relax the percentage of VAT from 17% to a smaller number. The number that attracts itself to me is 10%, but I recognize that we will not get there overnight. But I'm prepared to suggest to the government that they at least have their financial team study what the impact would be if VAT was permanently reduced from 17% to 13%. I believe that the government used that in the budget last year to try and spur consumption this year. And as a consequence, they said for the first 6 months they would have a reduced VAT rate. I can tell you that in Nevis, we did not see any corresponding drop in receipts from VAT. And that is an interesting sort of empirical bit of information, because if you reduce the rate from 17 to 13, but overall in Nevis, VAT actually increased in terms of how much you earned, it suggests to me that, one, the economy is growing, but it also suggests, two, that the lower rate led to greater consumption. And whilst I am not an economist and I do not have the answer, I believe that it is time for us to look and see whether or not there's an opportunity to reduce that historically high rate. It's one of the highest in the region at 17%, and to bring it down and to see whether or not by that engineering, if you will, that reform, we can stimulate more consumption in the local economy and therefore lead to greater growth. I believe we have talent within the chamber and within the Ministry of Finance that can look at this and come up with a solution. In that vein, we also have this practice of offering a Christmas duty exemption. I think it's what, 250 US or something, that we offer each year. And Madam Speaker, I am suggesting, respectfully, that we look at models that apply elsewhere in the Caribbean. Because elsewhere in the Caribbean, what they have is a permanent arrangement. So rather than the way we're doing it, where every Christmas we have a flood because people are given an exemption once a year. In other parts in the Caribbean, what they've done is they have a minimum threshold, and they grant you that all year round. And that is especially helpful for people who are of a lower income bracket. So for example, I'm advised that in Antigua, 100 US is the threshold. In Barbados, it is 30 US, 30.99. We have some numbers for the Dutch Islands, I will leave those. But in Dominica, it is US $55.21. St. Lucia, $22 US, Jamaica, 100 US dollars. What they do is they tell you, if your import is that or below, then you get the exemption. So it doesn't have to wait until Christmas, where we have $250, and there's a flood of people. So again, something that I think is worthwhile to look at as we examine, Madam Speaker, where we go in terms of stimulating local economic activity. I think that is critically important as we develop and grow this economy, that we put those matters in place, and at the very least we start to think outside the box as to whether a lower tax environment might actually generate greater economic activity locally. Madam Speaker, I turn very briefly on the issue of crime. I have had the privilege of engaging with our Commissioner of Police. I want to go on record to commend the Commissioner. I have to also go on record to commend the Honorable Minister with responsibility for national security and the entire team, including those in the High Command in Nevis, because I think we have seen a remarkable drop in violent crime in the country. And I think that all of us who are right thinking should applaud that. The mover made a point that I will reiterate, that there are some of us who it appears are only waiting for something bad to happen so that we can issue the breaking news without a thought about what it does to tourism, what it does to the image of the country, what impact it may have. And so I am a bit unhappy that we don't have breaking news that crime is down dramatically. But for those who are disinclined to report good news, I nevertheless from this rostrum want to extend my congratulations to the High Command of the Police Force, the security forces generally, and certainly to the new approach to citizen security in the country. I think it has yielded results, and I'm hopeful that the trends that we're seeing will continue. I must say that we have a couple hot spots that seem to be emerging in Nevis, and the police tell me that they're well aware of who the difficult ones may be, and so I'm hopeful that that too will peter out. I want to encourage our people, especially our young people, to focus on the possibilities that exist in our country, to focus on the opportunities that exist in our country. And that's why I campaigned here today so passionately for the ganja farmers. Give them the opportunity so that they can move forward and do something positive to help to build St. Kitts and Nevis. It would be remiss of me if I were not to say to the federal government that from the Nevis end, I'm grateful for the cooperation that we've seen on geothermal, the cooperation we've seen on the Nevis Airport project, and the cooperation that we're seeing on this bonus salary, which will also positively benefit the workers in Nevis. I would want to go on record to say that I am an advocate for Social Security reform, and I therefore support the efforts to move with alacrity to get this done. Social Security, you may not know, Madam Speaker, but assisted me in my own education. I was the first ever Social Security scholar. And it means a lot to me, that institution, because it has really made a significant difference in people's lives. A lot of people, there's maternity leave, they're off sick, whatever, Social Security has been there. It is one of those institutions which I truly believe has been transformative for the people of this country. And every chance I get, and I'm going to do it now again, I encourage people to pay their Social Security, especially those who are self-employed, to go in and register and pay. It is not a tax, it is an investment in your own future. And so I encourage people to do that. So yes, Social Security reform is necessary, and I'm publicly committing my support to what is afoot. The Honorable Prime Minister mentioned national health insurance. National health insurance reminds me of ganja, marijuana, cannabis, because we've talked about it until I don't know what else to say. When we started to talk about national health insurance, I had no gray hair. Now I have plenty gray hair, and we're still talking about national health insurance. And you know what occurred to me when the Prime Minister spoke, and he talked about the expansion of the health coverage for federal workers? It occurred to me, without the benefit of a study, that the amount of premium that we are currently paying to insure our workers, both at the federal level, and now I'm sure you're paying more because your coverage has expanded, and at the NIA level, that if we were to pool those premiums just from the government side, to my mind, we have already the start of a national health insurance scheme. What we're doing really now is we're funding the premiums for our workers, but outside the government workers, and we know that the government employs, well, certainly Nevis is the largest employer, I'm sure it's the same in St. Kitts. So there has to be a way that we can move this from beyond conversation to getting it to a point where we have implementation. Because we cannot talk about new smart hospital, hospital expansion in Nevis, MRI and all of these things without having a mechanism to pay for it. And insurance has to be the answer. And again, I'm urging, as I do every year, that we move with greater speed in relation to that. Madam Speaker, I am nearing the end of my intervention, but I wanted to look at the audit report. And I wanted to say to the nation that the importance of the audit report cannot be understated. Why this document is relevant is that all of us can come in here and say what we want. We can spin, we can gloss, we can say. But the framers of our Constitution put together an independent body called the Director of Audit. And that independent body is critical because that body reviews the accounts of the government in Nevis and in St. Kitts and reports faithfully, without interference, what the numbers are. So if it's good news, it's in here, and if it's bad news, it's in here. And no amount of spin can make that any different. Now I spoke about the CBI, so I won't go back there. I spent quite a bit of time talking about that. But I want to look at something that's a little worrying to me, and that has to do with property tax. At page 6 of the audit report, it says that property tax in 2024 only contributed 2% to the revenue of the federal government. And then when we look at property tax on page 8, Madam Speaker, we see that in 2023, property tax contributed $14 million. And in 2024, property tax contributed the same $14 million. The reason I highlight property tax is because I feel it is one of those areas that is badly underperforming in St. Kitts and in Nevis. Whatever the problem is, it is one of those taxes which I think begs out, cries out for some reform. Because you cannot tell me that property tax in 2023 yielded 14 million, and a year later, property tax in 2024 yielded the same 14 million. What is that saying? No building happened for the year? No properties were improved? When was the last time that the property tax examiners did a reassessment of property values on St. Kitts? Minister of Finance is not here at the moment, but that's an important question. We are currently undergoing a revaluation exercise in Nevis, but it's the first such exercise in 15 years. And so again, I'm encouraging the government to look at these areas, because when I drive through some parts of St. Kitts, there are private homes that look like hotels. Beautiful homes, valuable homes. I tried to buy a piece of land in Frigate Bay the other day, and when the chap said to me, $30 a square foot, I almost swam back to Nevis. The speed with which I headed back to Nevis, Madam Speaker, because I say, if I'm paying $30 a square foot, well, got to be the land gonna make breakfast for me every morning. The land gonna build the house for me and all that, because on top of that, I still have to find money now to put up something on the land. So if land down here is selling for $30 a square foot, you mean to tell me that $14 million is all that we're netting in property tax? That number jumps out at me because there's something, to my mind, which we must look at in relation to property tax. So I raise that because that is badly underperforming and needs to be looked at. When we look at the economic performance over the last 5 years, and it is helpfully set out at page 10 of the audit report. And they produce a nice diagram there, a nice graph. And when we look at it, we really see that with the anomalous year of 2022, can go ahead. With the anomalous year of 2022, when despite record high levels of CBI receipts, we still recorded a deficit of over $100 million. That was an election year. The reality is that almost invariably, the graph reflects the CBI receipts. So, in 2020, we had a deficit of close to $100 million. 2021, that shot up to a surplus of maybe $120 million. By 2022, we were back in deficit. 2023, back in surplus. And in 2024, with CBI receipts waning, we have seen a significant deficit in last year of $261 million. So again, all connected to citizenship by investment, a point that I made earlier. I want to go on record to commend the government on the debt to GDP ratio. The audit report at page 11 speaks to the debt to GDP. It's a measure of a country's ability to pay back its debt. We knew that. The debt to GDP ratio of the government decreased from a revised debt to GDP ratio of 59.6% at the end of December 2023 to 57.6% at the end of December 2024. It means, therefore, that our debt to GDP ratio is falling. And incidentally, that also includes the NIA debt, which, as we know, is guaranteed by the federal government. What's instructive, Madam Speaker, is that the audit report makes plain that the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank has actually, during the 98th meeting of the Monetary Council, approved the recommendation to extend the date for achievement of 60% debt to GDP within the ECCU from 2030 to 2035. Why do I think that is worthy of mention? It means that while the rest of the ECCU, in the main, is asking for more time, St. Kitts and Nevis has already achieved the target. So the rest of the ECCU, and I've looked at the debt profile for St. Lucia, for Dominica, for Antigua, St. Vincent, and they're asking to give them extra time, allow them to go to 2035. St. Kitts and Nevis has already hit the mark, and in fact is lowering its debt to GDP. So I say kudos to the government on that. I think that that is a very important development that we should all be proud of. On the expenditure side, at page 17 of the audit report, I wanted to make the point that, and I quote, the appropriations for expenditure during 2024 are shown below. Original budget, $1,090,546,541. But importantly, Madam Speaker, there was a supplementary budget of $413,620.72. So the overall expenditure was $1.2 billion. Now, why is that important? That is important because, according to the Director of Audit, appropriation warrants to supplement the original budget for 2024 total $177 million, which increased the original budget by 16%. That is significant. And I just wanted to highlight that because it puts into question the efficacy of the budgetary process. Because if we're going to come in here and pass a budget and say that this is the number that we're working with, and then through supplementary or appropriation warrants increase that by 16% during the year, it begs the question as to what's happening. And then when we look at the reasons, beautifully laid out by the Director of Audit, when we look, for example, at page 20 of the audit report, it says why are the reasons for these appropriation warrants? And I read, additional funds required to cover personal emoluments for the ministry. And which ministry is that? Ministry of Public Infrastructure. And that is $495,000. Ministry of Education, additional funds needed for payroll expenses for early childhood, primary, secondary schools, and teachers in training at the Clarence Fitzroy Bryan College, $5.3 million. Ministry of Sports and Creative Economy, additional funds required to cover personal emoluments for the ministry, $600,000. And then the Ministry of Environment, Climate Action, and Constituency Empowerment, additional funds required to cover personal emoluments for the ministry, $2 million. These aren't, or ought not to be, surprise or unexpected expenses. What I mean by that, Madam Speaker, is ordinarily the appropriation warrant becomes relevant when there's some expenditure that was not budgeted for, it was not anticipated. Here we are talking about unbudgeted expenditure of $177 million total. But I raise the question, and hopefully I will get an answer, as to why at the start of the year, during the budgetary process, we did not know that we needed to pay payroll expenses for early childhood, primary, secondary school teachers. That seems odd. And then Ministry of Sports, $600,000 to pay early childhood, $5.3 million. To pay emoluments in the Ministry of Public Works, $495,000. And then the Ministry of Environment, Climate Action, $2 million. Those are amounts which, in my view, are unusual and ought to have been known during the budgetary process because, again, those are emoluments. Those are not some unexpected expenditure. And so I believe that those warrant some explanation. I want to look just very quickly at page 26 of the audit report. Page 26, Madam Speaker, speaks to the cash position. And again, we see the deteriorating position of the government because of the downturn in citizenship by investment. There was a decrease, and I'm reading, there was a decrease in the cash position of the government by $275.7 million at the end of 2024. If you look at the chart that is there, the cash at the beginning of 2024 was $535 million. That's what the federal government had in the bank. $535 million. At the end of 2024, that had fallen to $260 million. It means, therefore, that cash was being taken out to fund activities. Significant reduction in our cash reserves of some $275.7 million. That's what happens when you're overly dependent on CBI and CBI starts to fall. Cash amounts now are being sucked out to deal, therefore, with expenditure. And the last matter that I will raise, Madam Speaker, has to do with arrears of revenue, set out very ably by the Director of Audit at page 33 of the audit report. And the audit report says this: the statement of arrears of revenue is a requirement of the Finance Administration Act. The statement, Madam Speaker, shows arrears of revenue as at December 31st, 2024 at $200 million. $200 million, which was $39 million more than 2023. Put differently, this government has $200 million out on the road that is uncollected. $200 million. And it is $39 million more than 2023. When we look at the table, we see Finance, Customs, and Excise Department. You know what money people out there owe Customs? $47.5 million. Inland Revenue, $125.9 million. And the other big one is water, 21.7. I don't know why the minister not collecting the water rates. $21.7 million. People owe. Water already is one of the cheapest commodities in St. Kitts and Nevis. What people don't want to pay for it? $7.50, 1,000 gallons. Right? Not even, you pay $5, in Nevis you pay $5 for a bottle of water. So that's not a gallon. That's significantly less than a gallon. Huh? $21.7 million owed for water. And then at the Ministry of Health, $3.1 million. For a total of 199.6, call it $200 million. You cannot survive. And I am running a small government in Nevis, and I'm saying, so here, our people need to be responsible citizens. And you can't tell me that the country can function, Madam Speaker, if you have arrears out there of $200 million. And as you say, as the Director of Audit says, it has grown by 39 million in the last year alone. So that is telling me that there's substantial work that needs to be done. And individuals out there need to understand that if they use the water, pay for it. If they know they owe Customs, come to an arrangement. If they know they owe Inland Revenue, come to an arrangement. But continuing this posture of not paying, I think, is creating a serious problem with the ability of this government, as it is for the government in Nevis as well, to function and to do what it needs to do. And so I hope that I've been helpful to the government when I make those kinds of remarks. I end, the best part of my presentation, I end by saying, Madam Speaker, that it has been for me a privilege to stand in this House and to speak on this budget. The country is facing some headwinds, and I believe that there's some difficult times ahead. I feel that we, all of us, must gird our loins, we must put our shoulders to the wheel, and we must seek to engage as patriots of this country to do what is best to advance St. Kitts and Nevis. Along the way, we will have our differences. Along the way, we will have our political and other quarrels. But we must never lose sight of the fact that we are all Kittitians and Nevisians, and we must all aim for the best St. Kitts and Nevis that we can manage. Let it be our legacy in this Parliament that we left a better St. Kitts and Nevis for those who are yet to come. With those few words, I say thank you and I take my seat. May it please you.
Thank you to the honourable member for Nevis 9.
2.5 hours.
You have an official time?
Oh, I thought we started at 10. Oh, okay. Well, I don't know, can I go and drink?
Yes, so we have now had the response from the opposition. Perhaps we can suggest a short 5-minute break because the members on this side are ready to go, but just wanted to give the Parliament time to orient itself for the continuation of the debate.
What's taken place here at the Craft House is the masterclass in welding, metal craft, led by Master Welder, Mr. Joseph Jam Matthew. So this initiative is a cultural heritage initiative in the Ministry of Small Business, Entrepreneurship, Cooperatives and the Creative Economy. And part of the idea is to provide opportunities, learning and training opportunities for persons interested in skills that are directly relevant to our cultural heritage. We would have previously put out the stonemasonry masterclass, the coal making masterclass, and this morning we're doing the metal craft masterclass. And it's to ensure that these skill sets are very valuable to our cultural heritage and offers great economic opportunity and skills development opportunity for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, and persons would have come from all walks to take advantage of this training and to learn from a master with over 30 plus years of experience in the craft. We have persons from the public and private sector represented from across different organizations from St. Kitts and Nevis, male and female.
This is about medicine, about easing pain, about restoring dignity, about offering hope.
Just as ginger has been used for stomach pain, aloe for burns and skin irritations, moringa for boosting your immune system, so too must cannabis be recognized for what it is, another plant in nature's medicine cabinet.
There is now a legal pathway. There is now a regulatory regime to ensure the quality of the product which you are purchasing. There's the possibility of persons getting licenses to have lounges, which we see in Jamaica and St. Vincent and Antigua. We need to follow the rules and the laws carefully.
We are balanced by the responsibility to be firm against cannabis abuse and to uphold and support the laws, policies, and national efforts that seek to ensure that cannabis does not get into the hands of the vulnerable.
By learning from the journeys of others, we have been able to craft an approach that is thoughtful, strategic, and uniquely our own. Today, we step forward with confidence, building a foundation for a vibrant, well-regulated industry that will serve our people, strengthen our national economy, and position St. Kitts and Nevis as a model of innovation and a model of integrity.
The Organization of Rastafari Unity will no doubt be thankful to the government of today for their courageous and their bold move in making those steps in order to rectify some of the wrongs, to stay in line with the Constitution. And as such, we want to give praises to the government at this point.
I'm happy to note that our farmers will become stalwarts of this industry and stewards of wellness. Our researchers, guardians of discovery, and our citizens, the soul of this transformation. This is not about chasing trends. This is about shaping legacies. It is about restoring our bond with the land and the core and soul of our people. And through wisdom, through science, and through respect, let us walk boldly into this new chapter.
The Day of Interruption was deliberately and intentionally named as interrupting transmission of cycles of violence is actually one key principle of the public health approach. And so in all the schools, public and private, primary and secondary schools, we had the commitment from the Ministry of Education to host special assemblies that focused on the theme of anti-violence and crime.
Me don't know about you, but me love think it's bad.
I want you to remember that you are very special and never allow anybody to make you think less than who you really are. I want to say to all of you that we care about you. We want peace, tranquility in your schools, and we want you to concentrate on becoming a good citizen, a good human being, building St. Kitts and Nevis to become a sustainable island state.
I want to thank all those who participated, all of our key stakeholders. Special thanks to the Ministry of Education and of course to our children and young people who were so receptive to all of the messages around making sure that they say no to violence, say no to drugs, but say yes to peace and yes to kindness.
But me don't think it's bad.
We are grateful that the government saw the need to procure additional equipment sufficient to match the anticipated market demands for aggregates for construction projects in 2025.
It is with great pride that today we celebrate a significant milestone for the government of St. Kitts and Nevis with the commissioning of a newly upgraded government quarry. We are pleased to share that we have now commissioned 3 other critical pieces of equipment: the secondary crusher and the screening plant. Additionally, the rock back truck that you see on my right. With these new additions, the quarry's output is set to increase by over 300%. This incredible boost in production capacity will ensure that we can meet the demands of future infrastructure projects, avoid costly delays, and most importantly, reduce construction costs. The impact of this upgrade cannot be overstated. The quarry produces aggregates, materials like stone dust, half-inch stones and three-quarter-inch stones that are vital for the production of concrete and masonry blocks. In fact, while many materials used in construction are imported, steel, cement, PVC piping, electrical wires, 50% of the material input for concrete is comprised of aggregates, which we can now produce locally in higher quality and in greater quantities than ever before.
With the commissioning of these new additions, the Power Screen secondary crushing plant, the Power Screen screening plant, and the rock back truck, we take yet another step forward in enhancing the efficiency and productivity of our quarry operation.
To have this machine here is really a blessing to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. A CT scan machine, this piece of equipment, is critically important to treat a number of diseases because first one has to diagnose. It is important for strokes. Anyone who has a stroke really should get an emergency CT scan to determine the course of treatment. We know that strokes are very common here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and if you don't have a CT scan, it really limits how effectively you can treat those who suffer from strokes. The other thing that this machine offers is to be able to diagnose heart disease, especially the blood vessels around the heart. We don't have the capacity to fully diagnose these to determine course of treatment, but this machine has the capacity to do that. This piece of equipment is critically important and fundamental in making sure that we can improve treatment of you citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis. And all this is really towards our upgrading of our hospital, towards becoming an accredited institution. We're on a journey of accreditation, and therefore we must tackle the issues here from all perspectives, whether it is the physical plan, in terms of equipment, human resource development, and customer service, which I think is very, very important. So I want to implore on all of us who are involved in this, those who are here in the leadership position, those who will work with this machine, to care the machine, to take care of this machine, to really appreciate what this machine will do for our people, so that at the end of the day, we can make sure that healthcare gets to where we want it, which is to satisfy the needs of our people. Something like this, of course, is new, and so it would have had its teething issues, which we all expected to have. But at the end of the day, because everybody fundamentally is on the same page, which is to get something like this done in St. Kitts and Nevis to help us to transform, we're able to overcome all of the different challenges. And today, we are here. We are here launching this course.
The Crown St. Barnabas College and Dr. Wotam for facilitating us and hosting this training. And we will also like to thank our Prime Minister for donating the resources and the funds needed to purchase the electric vehicles and the equipment that we need to make this possible. And I know he truly believes in St. Kitts and Nevis is becoming a sustainable island state, and we want to do our part to make sure that that happens.
We are grateful to be a part of this so that we can enhance the future skills of our students and the workforce in general, so that we can continue embarking on innovation, sustainability, but also reaching our neighbors so that we can also contribute to that CARICOM agenda.
The Ministry of Education believes firmly in digital solutions, in partnerships, and in transforming education so that we meet the needs of this sustainable island state. I know we say we are trying to move towards there, but we have certainly made certain leaps in that direction, and therefore I would say we are well on our way. This program sees us at a fitting time when we ourselves in the Ministry of Education are looking at ensuring that we have vehicles that are electric vehicles. So if we are to make sure that we are on the cutting edge, we must have the facilities through which we can train individuals, whether it's within the Ministry of Education, in terms of our bus drivers, knowing the type of vehicles that we intend to procure, so that when they utilize them, they're able to best use them and make sure that anything goes wrong, they have some information as to what to do next. So having this course on island is critical for us.
From the Ministry of Education, we just procured 2 electric school buses. So now that the training is happening in St. Kitts, we are positioning our citizens to be equipped to ensure that we get the best use out of our vehicles when they do arrive. I'm happy with the outline of the course, but more specifically interested in the health and safety aspect of the training, and like the PSI, to encourage our participants to take advantage of the information that will be shared, and at the same time you share it with others as well. So you're being trained to help train others, so that in the region, we in the OECS, I think we might be the first in the OECS who is offering this training, which even makes the history even more heartwarming.
We have a regional responsibility. As St. Kitts and Nevis, we are launching this, but of course we want to extend this to our regional brothers and sisters. There might be something in their area that they can invite us to. So together we are leveraging our resources to make sure that we achieve sustainability, not just in St. Kitts and Nevis, but throughout the region. And so I'm elated. So I want to say to the participants to really take full advantage of the opportunity to learn.
May be seated. I recognize the Honourable Member for St. Christopher 3.
Madam Speaker, as Leader of Government Business, and given that this is a major national debate, considering the appropriation bill of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, and similar to what other parliaments have done, is just to bring a sense of order to the speaking in Parliament, so that we are clear and everyone can prepare for their time slot, etc. I am proposing a motion to establish a fair speaking order for government and for opposition. Government can choose who speaks at whichever time in their slot, as well as opposition can speak in whichever time they choose. So we are proposing, and this has been discussed with the members present here in opposition and the members present here in government. We are proposing, which is normally the case, of course, the mover and then the responder, which has happened already, that the government will then have one speaker next. The opposition will have an opportunity to have a speaker after that, government, then opposition and government. And we hope that we could accomplish that today, Wednesday. Tomorrow, Thursday, we hope to start with a government member, followed by an opposition member, followed by a government member, and then followed by 2 opposition members and 1 government member for Thursday tomorrow. And then on Friday, you have the 2 remaining government members, and if the mover then decides to wrap up on Friday, in an effort to try and wrap the debate by Friday so that persons can go about their business in this festive season. So I would like to propose that motion and to move that motion for that established order for the purposes of this budget debate.
Well, seconder, I recognize
I
the
second
honourable
the motion,
member.
Honourable Speaker. Thank you.
The question is that the order of speaking as announced, whereby, well, for the 3 consecutive days, be adopted. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. I recognize the Honourable Senator Philip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good afternoon to everyone. It's a pleasure for me, Madam Speaker, to rise and second the mover for this year's appropriation bill, shortly entitled the Appropriation 2026 Bill 2025. Speaking second, contributing on it. Sorry, my apologies. So to rise and contribute on this bill in support of this year's appropriation bill and the proposed budgetary priorities that were duly and well explained by the mover of the bill. I have been away for a little while, as you know, Madam Speaker, so I'd like to take the opportunity now to just thank everyone, including yourself, Madam Speaker, for the well wishes and encouragement that I received while I was on maternity leave for the past few months. I appreciate the well wishes and the prayers. I did receive them directly and indirectly, all that was sent through my parents. I'm happy to report that mother and baby are healthy and well, thanks to God. We need all of that. It's okay. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, and I am happy to be here to speak and make my contribution on this national budget. Madam Speaker, the budget presented speaks to investing in people and powering progress. That is the theme of this year's budget. But I believe this is something that this government has demonstrably done since taking office in 2022, Madam Speaker. I think the theme is not only fitting for this year's budget, but it has been the sentiment and the trajectory and the approach that we have taken ever since this administration, this SKNL administration, has taken office. This is our 3rd budget, and the Prime Minister and mover of the bill, the member for number 8, described this year's budget in his address as a budget of optimism, discipline, and compassion. After consulting the numbers, Madam Speaker, and making some comparisons, particularly for the ministries that I am responsible for, I wholeheartedly agree with the PM's description, with the mover's description of this budget being a budget of optimism, discipline, and compassion. The budgetary outlook is optimistic around realizing the Sustainable Island State agenda. It is disciplined around prioritizing the right investments at the right times, and it is compassionate in the ways that it centers the people, our people, as primary benefactors of this government's work. Madam Speaker, according to this appropriation bill, for the Ministry of Social Development and Gender Affairs and the Ministry of Youth Empowerment, Aging and Disabilities, we are experiencing a slight cutback compared to the 2025 budget, Madam Speaker. But this is by no means a complaint, because if you've been paying attention, Madam Speaker, since the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party took office in 2022, this government has invested near $250 million in human and social development initiatives. And Madam Speaker, these initiatives that I'm referring to are the hefty investments in social assistance, development programs, in subsidies that the people have been able to experience and benefit from, like in electricity, in water, in gas, It's the empowerment checks that, perhaps the most commonly known as handouts, what we call them empowerment checks, that were placed directly into people's wallets in order to help increase their purchasing power and to protect them from global inflationary shocks that threaten our quality of life. Madam Speaker, near $250 million. The PM would have mentioned specifically the value of some of these social development investments in his address. And to remind us, this year alone, 2025, the Budget Boost Wallet, which was an initiative where citizens received $5,000 over a 6-month period to pay for their food, utilities, and basic living essentials, the tax breaks that we received this year, these two alone were valued at $62 million, Madam Speaker. Then, of course, we cannot forget the LIFT program, which is still ongoing and costs the government over $30 million. Also, the STEP program, which also is still ongoing, is another additional $40 million, Madam Speaker. And we also remember the Aspire program that was launched, groundbreaking program. This should be transformational, this program, as a part of our legacy here as a government. That program itself, which puts money directly into the accounts and pockets of our children and young people, that, Madam Speaker, is an additional investment valued at another $4 million just this year, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is almost totaling near over $100 million just for those flagship programs, Madam Speaker. And we cannot forget that in addition to that investment, the recurrent expenditure that was budgeted for this year within the Ministry of Social Development and Gender Affairs in order to pay for the flagship programs that we know very well, such as school vouchers, such as early childhood subsidies, the emergency assistance, medical assistance, all of these programs that are delivered through the ministry. These are investments that are worth cumulatively an additional $35 to $45 million of recurrent expenditure that is financed. That's money that goes directly into the pockets of our people, Madam Speaker. And so total of all of this, cumulatively, for all of these initiatives, Madam Speaker, within these past 3 years, we're talking about this government having invested near $250